I'm Carol Anne Riddell, and welcome to Book It. When it comes to their pets, New Yorkers are a special breed, and no one knows that better than Dr. Amy Attas, a veterinarian who has treated thousands of animals in the comfort of their own homes since 1992. Now she's out with a book. It's called Pets and the City, True Tales of a Manhattan House Call Veterinarian. Amy, thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Your book is full of so many amazing stories, and I want to get to them. But before we do, tell us a little bit about how you became a house call vet to begin with.
I wish I could tell you that I had a brilliant business plan. I didn't. I was a young veterinarian. I did my training at the Animal Medical Center, the big multi-specialty hospital in Manhattan. I went out to work after that in a private practice on Park Avenue. And in that process, my boss kept promising me that he would make me a partner or he would sell me the practice. And then one day, on my 4th anniversary of working there, when he had promised to take me out to dinner and give me a cash bonus and a raise, he called me into his office and he fired me and told me to take all of my personal belongings and leave now. Well, of course, I was devastated. I didn't know where I was going to work after that. And so I stayed up all night and transferred my home telephone to a beeper so that people could reach me. And the first thing the next morning, 2 clients called and said, I don't know what's going on, but you're not at the hospital any longer and I need you. So without having a hospital to work out of, I made 2 house calls on day 1. I made 4 house calls on day 2. And I thought, I wonder if there's a business here. And in fact, it really suits my personality because I like that personal aspect with clients. I think there's so much more that you get from a relationship when you have an opportunity in someone's home to talk to them, meet them, see their families, watch them grow up. And it's been an extraordinary experience for me to do that.
So you have some very wealthy and famous clients. You also have many clients who are neither of those things. But you say when it comes to our pets, and particularly when our pets are sick, we're all the same.
I think so. I mean, I get to see people at their most vulnerable stage when their pet is sick. Pets are like our children.
Yes,
right? We love
100%.
them unconditionally. And so it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or a truck driver or you live in a housing project. It doesn't matter. We're all people and we all love our pets. And when our pets are sick, we want to do whatever we can to make them better. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the people are just people. And there's no difference in how we treat one segment of the population from the other.
So talking about a couple of your famous clients, though, Joan Rivers, you treated her dogs, and she was also instrumental in sort of helping you launch your practice, is that right?
So when I worked in the brick and mortar hospital right after becoming a veterinarian, there were certain A-list clients that only my boss wanted to see. And of course, Joan Rivers was one of them. But he also didn't want to work emergencies and weekends. So I got lucky in that a few times her dog Spike, who was part of her TV act, Spike would get sick after hours and I would be the veterinarian on call. And she liked me. And then she started to book her appointments for routine visits with me.
And also Billy Joel.
So Billy Joel I met by accident. He was staying in a hotel and the concierge had used the services of my practice previously. And he called and asked me to come to see a particular VIP's pet. And in this case, it was, as we joked, a VIP, a very important pug. Billy Joel had pugs. I am a serious pug lover.
I know you are.
So that was a wonderful, famous client for me to meet. I was also a big Billy Joel fan my entire life. So very, very special.
You know, a lot of people are going to love reading, of course, about the celebrity clients and about the amazing real estate that you've seen in Manhattan. But I was particularly moved by the anecdotes about the human-animal bond. They just are remarkable. So tell us just a little bit about Butter, the golden retriever. That was an incredible story.
So Butter was an amazing dog who belonged to an amazing woman. Ellen was a television journalist. She was a total spitfire, but her life changed when she developed multiple sclerosis and eventually became paraplegic and eventually quadriplegic. She had a service dog, Butter. So when she called to make the appointment, she didn't say that Butter was a service dog. She didn't tell me anything about him. She just said he was getting older and she would like to have him examined on a regular basis. So when I went to the apartment and rang the doorbell, I didn't hear a dog bark. I eventually heard someone say, "Just a minute," and then the door opened, and no human was there. When I looked down, there was Butter with a pulley in his mouth attached to the doorknob. He had actually opened the door, and then he led me to see Ellen, and I saw that she was in a wheelchair. She explained the situation, that Butter was actually a caregiver. He allowed her to be at home alone, without having someone with her 24 hours a day, and for someone who was so fiercely independent, that was really, really helpful, but he had a job to do. He had to protect her. So while I was working, talking to her, Butter just lay his paw over her lap, and that was just to stabilize her so she wouldn't roll over or possibly fall out of her wheelchair. When I got to doing the physical exam, which fortunately was perfect, he was a healthy dog, when I was finished, she gave him commands like, Butter, get my pocketbook, and he would return with her pocketbook. He knew hundreds of commands that he could help her with during the day so she could stay alone.
That is just remarkable. And there's a lot of evidence, scientific evidence, right, about what animals contribute to our well-being.
So I think we don't fully appreciate how important they are to our well-being. There's scientific evidence that just petting a dog can lower someone's high blood pressure. Even looking at fish in a fish tank can lower your blood pressure.
Wow, that I did not know.
We are so in tune with our animals. And in many instances, some of which I describe in the book, they're a lifeline for someone. You know, I had a client, Mrs. Blum. She lived alone. She was in her 90s, and she also had a very senior dog. And when her dog eventually got sick and died, she gave up her will to live. Because I knew her so well from doing house calls to her for years, I felt it important to go and visit her after her dog died to make sure she was okay. And I was shocked by how she looked. I mean, she was disheveled. She didn't get out of her nightgown. She never looked like that when her little dog was alive. And I realized that what I needed to do was help her get another dog. Now, how do you get a dog for someone in their 90s who lives alone? It needed to be a low-maintenance dog and a dog that was a bit older so that it would be the right temperament and the right size for her. And I called in a lot of favors from pet rescue groups and wound up getting an adorable little black toy poodle for her. And when I brought it over to her house, she absolutely was not interested at all. But I explained that I needed her help, that she had to just foster him until I could get him a permanent home, but I had no place else to put him. And since I knew she had such a loving home, could she just hang on to him for a day or two? I knew exactly what I was doing.
You knew what would happen there.
I knew. And when I went back to check on the two of them, she was dressed, she looked better. I really feel that this little dog saved her life.
You make an interesting point in the book about animals with disabilities and how we could learn a bit from them as humans ourselves, and you talk about your own dog, Bumper. But animals have a way of sort of accepting things that we don't.
So the first thing is they don't look in the mirror, so they don't know that they look different. And for the most part, animals with disabilities do really, really well. They've been an inspiration to me and for others. So Bumper, who you've just mentioned, Bumper was my rescue dog. I found him when I was in veterinary school. I was a little late to class. I was trying to rush into the building, but I saw a pug dog tied to a tree. And as I said, I have a thing for pugs, so I went over just to pet him. And there was a note attached to the tree that he was tied to that said, I am blind, please take good care of me.
How lucky Bumper was to be found by a vet, though.
I think that was divine intervention. I don't think that was luck. I wound up taking Bumper home that night, you know, because I wanted him to feel loved, and that began the rest of our lives together. Bumper declared himself mine. He literally bumped around the apartment because he was 100% blind. He lifted his leg on the front door and urinated as if to say, this is my territory, and that was it. We were together ever since.
So, you know, one thing that was interesting to me in the book that you go through, and I'd like to go through this, just a sort of a list of a few things that are common hazards in our homes that we may not know about. I was struck by a story you told about a cat who had eaten a bit of a plant or a flower.
Yeah, so lilies, a plant that we have in our homes in the springtime. They're often used in Easter bouquets. They are such a toxic plant to cats. A couple of nibbles of the flower, the stamen, the stem, the leaves, the roots, even drinking the water that the cut flowers are put in are poisonous to cats.
Wow.
It causes irreversible kidney damage.
Jeez.
So the story in the book is about a cat named Croc, named because it behaved like a crocodile. It was a very, very difficult cat to work on.
Wasn't the friendliest cat, right?
You know, the family loved it, and I'm sure it was a wonderful cat with the family, but it wasn't so great with anybody else who came into the house. And Croc was sick, and I had just seen Croc 2 weeks before, so I knew that the blood work was normal and everything was fine. So I thought it was just going to be maybe some hairballs or some, you know, routine vomiting. But when the owner handed me her cat, who normally I had to chase around the apartment and be really careful from swatting claws and, you know, bared teeth, Croc didn't care. And she was,
something was wrong.
I knew something was seriously wrong, and I was really like wishing that Croc was trying to bite me again, because this was an indication she was really sick. Her blood work indicated that she had irreparable kidney damage, even beyond what we could help with even dialysis. And the culprit was right there on the table. There was an Easter bouquet, and there were holes in everything, the leaves, the petals, whatever, and the family had no idea.
And just one other thing on that topic, Amy, I was also surprised to read in your book about this high-rise syndrome with cats, and also the way that in some cases when a cat falls, the way that it falls is what helps it survive.
So let me explain what high-rise syndrome is. I don't want anyone to think that this was done experimentally. These were case reports of animals who fell out of windows. So usually the first few days of spring, when the weather is nice and we've had the heat on and our apartments are stuffy, everybody wants to open their windows. Well, that is attractive for cats. They smell the smells of outside. They like to sit on windowsills. And unfortunately, cats do mistakenly fall out of windows. They fall asleep and stretch and fall out, or sometimes think they can catch something outside. So what was studied at the Animal Medical Center, and this is about 35 years ago or so, they had compiled retrospective cases. These are things that happened that they had the data from. No cats were deliberately injured. And what they found is, depending on how high a cat fell from, that would determine how injured they were. So we know that cats, when they fall, have the ability to what's called right themselves, where they can get their legs to land first, but they need to have a certain distance in order to turn the proper direction.
In the air.
In the air. So what they found in this study is that cats who fell from 6 floors or below were seriously injured because they didn't have an opportunity to turn over and land on their feet, and many of those cats were seriously injured or died. Cats that fell from 7 flights to probably 10, 11, 12, they were injured, but because they had an opportunity to land on their feet, they broke legs, they ruptured sometimes abdominal organs, they broke ribs, but they lived. And those cats who fell from higher usually didn't live at all. So then the thing about high-rise syndrome, this is a preventable accident. And so, you know, you need to keep your windows closed. You need to have screens in windows that you're ever going to open. You have to remember that a terrace door is an invitation for somebody to go investigating outside. And our pets don't always make the best choices.
I wanted to touch on your writing the book. I understand that you would come home most days from work and say to your husband, "You're not going to believe what happened today." And that's kind of how this got started?
It is. You know, my experiences doing house calls are so different from the experiences of being a regular veterinarian in a hospital. And I would come home and say, you know, you just can't make up what happened. And I kept saying, oh, I'll remember these stories forever. But after a year or two of saying that, I thought, I think I'm going to put these down on paper. And when I did that, what I found is that the stories were different, but ultimately a lot of the themes were the same. And I thought that would make a really interesting book, because what happens sometimes with a celebrity also happens with somebody who, you know, is not famous or not rich. And I felt that there was going to be a really interesting story to tell there. The other thing I found is that my experiences just driving around Manhattan lent themselves to being a really interesting part of the book. I was so influenced by the All Creatures Great and Small series, the James Herriot's books. And when I go back and look at those, I mean, of course he was a veterinarian and he took care of dogs, cats, horses, and cows. But he also met some very interesting people who were his clients. And of course, the atmosphere of the Yorkshire Dales played a part in the book. And I felt I had the same thing with my experiences with my clients, their pets, and New York City.
Manhattan being a character for you.
Absolutely.
And just a last question for you, Amy. You say in the book that our pets make us better people, and I couldn't agree with you more, but tell me from your perspective, why?
So I think they make us feel empathy. I think that they reduce us to like loving people. And even in my world, if I'm having a really busy day and maybe, you know, I don't have the patience that I would ordinarily have, all of a sudden I look at someone who's dealing with a sick pet and I realize they love that pet the way I loved my pets.
Yeah.
And that just changes me and I turn into a better person. I think they do that for us.
I'm sure my dog makes me a better person. So thank you so much for all this time, Amy. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We are back with another edition of The Fine Print. Who doesn't love a book by the beach or the pool? Summer is a great time to add to your reading list. Here with some suggestions and comments is Andrew Albanese, executive editor at Publishers Weekly. Andrew, thanks for coming by again.
Carol Anne, thank you for having me.
So I do want to hear some recommendations, but before we get to that, tell me a little bit about summer reading in general. Is there one genre that tends to be more popular, or do you see habits change at all?
See, that's a really interesting question, and it sounds like a simple question, but it's not, right? I think traditionally we have the idea that summer is beach reads. We've always thought of summer as the time when we have more time to read, though as a parent I can tell you I do not have more time to read in the summer. So I think what we're learning now too, because we have more data about readers, that people want to read more of what they like to read, period. So I think there was a marketing effort in the past among publishers to push sort of more summary reads to people. But I think what we're now seeing, because so much marketing is online and through social media, that people just are reaching out for what they want to read. It can be Danielle Steele, it can be Robert Caro, it can be whatever they want. If they're going on vacation, they're going to grab a book that they would otherwise not have time to read.
And what about audiobooks? Do audiobooks tend to become more popular? I mean, people are on the road, people are, maybe not carrying a book with them.
Audiobooks are only going up right now. We've seen this trend. It's been, I think, 12 years now straight of significant double-digit growth for audio. And I think the reason there is obvious. We've gotten away from books on tape in the Walkman to having digital. Now Spotify's in the game, where you just can log onto your Spotify and click an audiobook and start listening. And we do a summer reads list. We're going to have to start doing a summer listens list. Absolutely, more and more people are listening to audiobooks in general. And I think you're really going to see a big boost, as I said, now with Spotify in the game as well. Audiobooks are just a huge part of the market and growing.
So let's get to your summer reads list. How long have you guys been doing this list?
So we've been doing this list for about 12 years continuously. We've done versions of it in the past differently. We do a lot of previews and other stuff. We do a lot of book lists at Publishers Weekly. And I should probably mention too that we're a pre-publication review, right? So everything that we do is done 3 to 6 months before a book actually comes out. So we did the summer reads list in April. You couldn't buy those books. Now you can. Now most of them are out. But those lists are really fun because those are our review editors who see thousands of books every year, who are offering their own personal recommendations. So what you won't see on that list is a lot of bestsellers, a lot of big name authors, though there are a few will sneak on eventually. But what you will see is some really eclectic picks from people who are deeply immersed in the subjects that they cover.
Yeah, which is what makes it so interesting. So let's get to it. So talking nonfiction history, what's on the list, something you'd recommend? So
one book on the list that I would highly recommend, Mark Greenewalt, who's one of our nonfiction editors, it's A History of Hip Hop by Questlove. We celebrated the 50th anniversary of hip hop just recently, and we will never stop celebrating it, I believe. That book, I think, is probably for anybody who is a fan of music, but also just cultural history in New York City. They're going to really find that book, I think, to be
a big one,
a gem for sure.
Okay. Andrew, I like all books, but in the summer, I have a tendency to go to the thrillers when I'm at the beach. So you got anything for me?
Lots of great mysteries and thrillers. If you're a fan of the franchise stuff, there is new James Patterson that's out. There's a new Robert Ludlum, there's a new Bourne entry.
Right.
But I like thrillers when I read them to have like a little international flavor to them, a little intrigue. And there's 2 on the list that I put on my own personal list to read this summer.
Okay, I want to hear them.
Which I'll probably never get to, but nevertheless, they're on my list. One is called The Hunter by Tana French. And it is about this expat American who's chasing, I believe it's his kid's biological father around the Irish countryside.
That is going on my list too.
It sounds like Irish countryside thriller, done, I'm in.
Yeah.
And the other is a Japanese translation. It's called The Night of the Baba Yaga.
Okay.
And it's by Akira Otani, and it's a Japanese crime family in 1979. Everything about it just sounds fascinating to me. So that is another one that I put on my list as well.
Memoirs. What do you got for memoirs? I saw a couple of those on the list.
Yeah, memoirs are a huge and growing subject as well. And our reviews editor, David Adams, he led his summer picks with a book called 1974, which is a personal memoir by Francine Perose. And that is about Vietnam, the summer in San Francisco, the Pentagon Papers. It just sounds like a really fascinating period in history. I personally am loving an unfinished history by Doris Kearns Goodwin right now, which is history, but it's also a memoir. It's like it brings 2, it's fantastic. She's wonderful. And it's basically about her husband, Dick Goodwin, who's an advisor to JFK. As he was dying, they decided to undertake this huge project of looking through his boxes of memories, 300 boxes, I think. In total, maybe more than that. And it's a personal look back at the 1960s and also a reflection on their relationship, and it's excellent. My
husband's a big history buff, so I'm gonna have to put that one on the list. Just, another topic I just wanted to touch on quickly, Andrew, and you and I have talked about this before, but the issue with getting kids to read. We've talked about how there's been this lag with some of the middle school grades following the pandemic. What's happening with kids and reading, particularly as we head into the summer and they're not in school?
Yeah, I mean, what we saw was a sort of the pandemic just caused a break in this one, section of the kids market, right, where students were not reading, they were on screens a lot, and it's been a little more difficult for the middle grade readers, the ones in middle school, ages 11 to 14, to sort of get back to books. And I think what we're seeing is the publishers remain committed to this. We're going to see this bounce back, absolutely. A lot of that bounce back is going to come through how the schools will address it.
Yeah.
But in bookstores, what we're seeing is like a real huge jump in horror. So there's genres out there that kids are really sort of diving into that I think we're going to see a lot more of in the coming years. My own daughter, who's a middle schooler, is just eating up horror books right now.
Okay, well, as long as they're reading, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, interesting stuff. Thank you so much for your time. Good to see you again, Andrew.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Up next, we're going to head over to Linda Stasi. As always, she is back with her reviews in Uncensored.
In my multi-hatted life, I am a book reviewer, yes, but I'm also a journalist and author. So that means I hang around with other journalists and authors, right? Right. But what happens when one of those people has a new book out? Well, on goes my journalist hat, and difficult as it is, I review the book the same way I'd review a book by someone I never met. That's why I'm very relieved to say The Murder of Mr. Ma, a collaboration by a great writer I know, S.J. Rosen, and one I don't know, John Shen Yen Ni, is one of the most fun, exciting, and unusual books you'll read this summer. The collaboration itself is an interesting one. Rosen is a New York author of mysteries that revolve around 2 private eye partners, a Chinese-American woman and American man. Ni, on the other hand, was a top exec at Marvel Comics, which is, as you know, the superhero company of superheroes. The result is a novel about a martial arts master and a Chinese professor who partner up to solve murders in London circa 1920. The end result is like watching a movie, that you're reading. Martial arts, mystery, murder, and investigations clash with the stuffy British post-World War I era. And P.S., the audio version is also perfect for your summer road trip. The next book came out last year, but I just couldn't find a more perfect beach read this year than Bad Summer People by Emma Rosenblum. It's about horrible people who go to the same tiny beach community on Fire Island every year. They go, their parents go, and their kids will grow up and go too. There is absolutely no one to like, everyone to hate, with just a few stragglers who are, for the most part, forgettable. Forgettable, that is, until one of them is found dead under the beach walk with a bicycle on top. Mostly these Bad Summer People are Upper East Siders who get Botox, play tennis endlessly as though it matters, and have affairs with each other. Like I said, there's no one to like, but the book is likable fun anyway. My big criticism is that although it's juicy fun, it's not especially well written, with the word awkward used too many times. In fact, there are 2 sentences that use the word awkwarder, which is, well, awfully awkward, no? But if you hate annoying, snotty East Siders with too much plastic surgery, and really, who doesn't, then you'll love Bad Summer People. For Uncensored, I'm Linda Stasi.
That is our show for today. Thanks so much for watching. A quick reminder to check us out on social media. We'd love to know what you're reading. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. See you next time on Book It.